They laughed when she crawled out of a dumpster behind Pike Place Market, called her gutter trash, vermin, a stain on the sidewalk that decent people stepped over without a second glance. But when Lyra Ashwin whispered 7 words in a language dead for 300 years, the most powerful vampire in the Pacific Northwest fell to his knees in the rain.
Strong. Trust me.
This is her story, 22 years
Then
old,
rise with me.
homeless for 3 years, hunted by men in gray suits who wanted her dead for reasons she didn't understand, and the last living heir to a queen who saved an empire with her dying breath. In 72 hours, Lyra would go from invisible to untouchable, from sleeping in strangers' cars to sitting beside a throne. This is how a forgotten girl brought kings to their knees. But first, she had to survive the night. The rain over Seattle wasn't gentle. It never was in November. It came down in sheets that turned the world into a gray watercolor blur, washing the filth from the streets into storm drains that couldn't handle the deluge. The kind of rain that soaked through cheap jackets and settled into your bones. Lyra Ashwin knew that cold intimately. She stood in the employee entrance of Murphy's Diner, her army surplus parka dripping onto the cracked linoleum floor. The jacket was 3 sizes too big, purchased for $2 at a Goodwill in Ballard. It smelled like mothballs and someone else's cigarette smoke. The boots on her feet were held together with duct tape. She'd worked the graveyard shift, 11 at night until 7 in the morning. 8 hours of refilling coffee cups for truckers and serving eggs to insomniacs who stared at their phones like they held the secrets of the universe. Garrett Murphy, the owner, stood behind the register with his arms crossed. He was a thick man with a beer gut that strained against his stained white shirt. His face was red. It was always red, but this morning it was the particular shade of red that meant someone was about to get fired. Lyra already knew. She could feel it in the way the other waitress, Sandra, wouldn't meet her eyes. "You stink," Garrett said. Not quietly. The morning rush was starting. People at the counter turned to look. Customers are complaining. Lyra said nothing. She'd learned that silence was safer than defense. "I gave you a chance," Garrett continued, louder now. He wanted an audience. "Let you work here even though you got no address, no references, and this is how you repay me? Coming in here smelling like a dumpster?" "I showered at the shelter yesterday," Lyra said quietly. "I'm clean." "Clean," Garrett laughed. It was a mean sound. "Look at you. Your clothes are falling apart. You look like something I'd scrape off my shoe." A man at the counter snickered. A woman in a business suit wrinkled her nose and moved her purse farther from where Lyra stood. This was the game. The one Lyra had played for 3 years. Be invisible. Don't make waves, survive, but invisibility only worked until someone decided to see you. "You're done," Garrett said. "Get out, and don't come back." Lyra felt the weight of every eye in the diner. She thought about arguing. Thought about explaining that she'd worked harder than anyone here. That she'd covered Sandra's shifts when Sandra was too hungover to show up. That she'd scrubbed floors until her hands bled because Garrett was too cheap to hire a proper cleaning crew. Instead, she turned and walked out into the rain. The door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. She made it 3 blocks before she stopped in an alley and let herself cry. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that mixed with the rain on her face. She gave herself 2 minutes. That was all she could afford. Then she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her parka and started walking. The shelter in Pioneer Square opened at 5 in the evening. It was noon. Lyra had 5 hours to kill and nowhere to go. She walked through the market, past vendors selling fresh fish and handmade jewelry. A busker played guitar under an awning, his case open for tips. She had 47 cents in her pocket. She dropped it in as she passed. The rain had lightened to a drizzle. Seattle specialty. Not quite raining, not quite stopped. Just endless gray dampness that made everything feel heavy. Lyra found a bench under the viaduct and sat. She pulled the locket from beneath her shirt and held it in her palm. It was an ugly thing. Rusted iron on a leather cord that had broken twice and been retied with fishing line. The metal was pitted with age, rough under her fingertips. It should have been worthless, but it was the only thing she owned that mattered. Her grandmother had given it to her 3 years ago, 3 years and 2 months to be exact, the night before Evangeline died. Lyra could still see that hospital room, the fluorescent lights that buzzed, the smell of disinfectant trying to cover the smell of death. Her grandmother's hand, paper-thin skin over bird bones, gripping Lyra's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me carefully," Evangeline had whispered. Her voice was reedy, damaged by the cancer eating through her lungs. "This locket belonged to your great-great-great-grandmother, Catherine's daughter. It's been passed down through the women of our family for 300 years. Lyra had thought it was the morphine talking. Evangeline had been drifting in and out of lucidity for days. If you ever meet a man with eyes like burning gold, her grandmother continued, you must say these words exactly as I teach you. Do you understand? Exactly. Grandma, you need to rest. Say it with me. Evangeline's grip tightened. The debt remains unpaid until the last winter falls. The words felt strange in Lyra's mouth. The rhythm was wrong. The sounds didn't quite fit together the way English should. Again, Evangeline demanded. They repeated it 17 times, Lyra counted. By the end, her grandmother was crying. He will understand, Evangeline whispered, and when he does, you'll be safe. Promise me you'll never take off the locket, never. Not even to shower, not even to sleep. I promise. Evangeline died 4 hours later. Lyra had kept her promise. The locket never left her neck, even when she lost the apartment, even when she lost everything else. The locket stayed. She ran her thumb over the rough iron now, sitting under the viaduct with rain dripping from the concrete overhead. The metal was warm. It was always warm, no matter how cold she got. Dementia, the doctors had said. End-stage cancer patients often experience confusion. But the words stayed with Lyra. The debt remains unpaid until the last winter falls. What debt? What winter? She'd never know. And it didn't matter. Garrett was right about one thing. She did smell. Her parka reeked of the dumpster she'd taken shelter behind last week when the shelter was full. Her jeans had a stain she couldn't wash out. Her hair, even freshly washed, was dull and lifeless. She was 22 years old and she looked 40. That's what poverty did. It aged you, made you invisible, turned you into something people crossed the street to avoid. Lyra closed her eyes and let the sound of the rain fill her head. She didn't notice the men in gray suits until it was too late. They moved like professionals, 3 of them, spread out in a formation that cut off escape routes without seeming to. Lyra only spotted them because she'd learned to watch for predators. The first one was tall, Nordic-looking, with short blonde hair and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He stopped 10 feet from her bench and pulled something from his jacket. A photograph. He showed it to a vendor selling smoked salmon. The vendor shook his head. The man in the gray suit moved to the next stall. Lyra's stomach went cold. She stood slowly, careful not to draw attention. Pulled her hood up, started walking in the opposite direction, toward the water. She'd gone half a block when she saw the second one. This one was shorter, stockier, with a scar across his left eyebrow. He was showing the same photograph to a coffee shop barista. The third one cut her off at the intersection. He was younger than the others, maybe 30. Dark hair slicked back. He looked at Lyra and his hand went to his waist. She saw the bulge of a weapon under his suit jacket. She ran. Not toward the shelter. They'd follow her there, trap her. Not toward the market. Too crowded. Too many witnesses if they decided to grab her in public. She ran toward the waterfront, toward the shipping yards and industrial buildings where fewer people would notice if someone screamed. Her boots slapped against wet pavement. Her breath came in gasps. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Running. Getting closer. Lyra cut left into an alley, jumped a chain-link fence that tore her jeans, landed hard on the other side. Kept running. The men in gray suits didn't give up. She ran for 6 blocks. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like they would give out. She turned a corner and found herself facing the back entrance of a high-rise. Massive. Glass and steel. A sign read Ravencroft Tower in letters 3 feet tall. The service door was locked. Keycard access. But Lyra had learned things living on the streets. Survival skills that wouldn't go on a resume. She pulled a bent paperclip from her pocket. Picked the lock in 11 seconds. The door clicked open. Behind her, the footsteps were getting louder. Lyra slipped inside and let the door close. The lock engaged with a heavy thunk. She stood in a concrete stairwell, breathing hard. Listened. Silence. Then from outside, a voice. Male. Frustrated. She's in the building. Call it in. Lyra didn't wait. She ran down the stairs, following signs for parking level B3. The parking garage was dim. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The air smelled of gasoline and concrete dust. Row after row of expensive cars gleamed in their designated spots. Lyra moved between them, looking for somewhere to hide, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. That's when she saw it. In the far corner, away from the other vehicles, sat a car that looked like it belonged in a museum. Vintage. Gorgeous. Silver paint that caught the light even in the dimness. The curves were elegant, timeless. A 1964 Aston Martin DB5. Though Lyra didn't know cars well enough to identify it by sight, she just knew it was beautiful. And the passenger door was unlocked. Lyra looked behind her. No one. The elevator doors were closed. She had maybe 3 minutes before security started searching. She opened the car door and slid into the passenger seat. The interior smelled like leather and something else, something rich and expensive that she couldn't name. The seats were soft, butter soft. She sank into it and pulled the door closed as quietly as possible. Then she waited. Minutes passed, her heartbeat slowed. The adrenaline started to fade, leaving her shaky and cold. She was so tired. The seat was so comfortable. Lyra told herself she'd just rest for a moment, just until the men in gray suits gave up and left. Then she'd slip out, find another shelter, disappear into the city. Her eyes closed. She didn't mean to fall asleep, but she did. Lyra woke to the sound of footsteps, not running, walking, measured, confident, the click of expensive shoes on concrete. She opened her eyes and saw a shadow moving between the cars, tall, broad-shouldered, coming closer. Panic jolted through her. She started to sit up, to reach for the door handle. Too late. The driver's side door opened. A man slid into the seat beside her. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Lyra saw him in profile first, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked carved from marble. Dark hair swept back from a face that was handsome in a way that made her think of predators. Beautiful and deadly. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lyra had made in her entire life. His hands on the steering wheel were elegant, long-fingered, with veins that stood out against pale skin. Then he turned to look at her. His eyes were amber. Not brown, amber. Like molten gold with flecks of rust. They glowed faintly in the dim light of the garage, and they were filled with rage. "Get out," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. But underneath the control was something that made Lyra's hindbrain scream danger. She reached for the door handle. Her fingers fumbled. Wouldn't work properly. The man moved, faster than should have been possible. 1 second he was in the driver's seat. The next he was leaning across the center console, his hand gripping the collar of her parka. "I said get out." His lips pulled back. Lyra saw teeth, normal human teeth in front, but the canines were too long, too sharp. They hadn't been there a moment ago. Fangs. Oh God, fangs. He dragged her out of the car, not through the passenger door. He pulled her across the console, out the driver's side, and threw her onto the concrete floor of the garage. Lyra hit hard. Pain exploded through her hip. She scrambled backward on her hands and knees until her back hit the tire of the Aston Martin. The man stood over her. The amber eyes were brighter now, glowing, inhuman. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Was it the Corvinus clan? Did Damien think a human spy would be amusing?" Lyra couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the fangs were real. The eyes were real. The cold radiating from him like he was carved from ice was real. "Answer me," he growled. He stepped closer. Lyra could see his shadow fall over her like a shroud. "You have 3 seconds to give me a reason not to drain you dry and leave your body for the maintenance crew to find." 3 seconds. Lyra's hand went to her throat, to the locket. Her fingers closed around the warm iron. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just yanked the locket out from under her shirt and held it up like a shield. "Because," she choked out, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain that still dampened her hair. "Because the debt remains unpaid until the last winter falls." The words came out in that strange rhythm her grandmother had taught her. The sounds that didn't quite fit together right. The man froze. Completely. Utterly. Still, his eyes went wide. The rage drained from his face, replaced by something that looked like shock. Like he'd been struck. He stared at the locket, then at Lyra, then at the locket again. Then Cale Ravencroft, vampire king of the Pacific Northwest, CEO of a fortune worth billions, apex predator who had lived for 423 years, dropped to his knees on the dirty concrete floor of his own parking garage. His hand trembled as he reached toward the locket, stopped just short of touching it. "Where?" he whispered. His voice was broken, raw. "Where did you learn those words?" Lyra couldn't answer, couldn't process what was happening. This man, this creature with eyes that glowed and fangs that could tear out her throat, was kneeling in front of her like she was something sacred. "Where?" he asked again, louder now, desperate. "My grandmother," Lyra managed. "She told me before she died. She said if I ever met a man with eyes like burning gold, I should say that. She said you owed us a life." The man closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the glow had dimmed. The amber was softer. He looked at her the way someone might look at a ghost. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. Lyra Ashwin. He bowed his head, actually bowed, like she was royalty and he was a subject. Lyra Ashwin, he repeated, descendant of Isolde's bloodline. I am Kael Ravencroft. And 300 years ago, I swore an oath to protect your family until the last winter falls. He raised his eyes to meet hers. Get in the car. It wasn't a request. Lyra's legs wouldn't move. Kael stood, extended his hand. I won't hurt you. You have my word. But those men who were chasing you, they're called the Order of St. George. And if they find you before I can get you somewhere safe, they will kill you. Do you understand? Lyra looked at his hand, pale, cold, inhuman. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. He will understand. And when he does, you'll be safe. She took his hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was gentle as he helped her to her feet. We need to move quickly, Kael said. He guided her back into the Aston Martin, this time into the passenger seat properly. He closed the door, moved around to the driver's side spot, and slid behind the wheel. The engine started with a purr like a satisfied cat. Where are we going? Lyra asked. Kael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Somewhere they can't follow. Somewhere I can figure out why the last heir of Isolde is being hunted by the most fanatical vampire killers in North America. He threw the car into gear and they shot forward, tires squealing on the concrete. Lyra looked at the man beside her. This stranger, this creature, this vampire who had knelt before her because of 7 words. She should have been terrified. She was. But underneath the terror was something else. Something that felt almost like hope. For the first time in 3 years, Lyra Ashwin wasn't invisible. Someone saw her, and the world would never be the same. The spire sat on Queen Anne Hill like a crown of glass and steel. It was visible from almost anywhere in Seattle, a modern architectural marvel that seemed to defy gravity, cantilevered over the cliff edge with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the city and Puget Sound beyond. Lyra stared up at it through the windshield of the Aston Martin as they climbed the private road. The rain had started again, turning the world into sheets of gray, but the building glowed from within. Warm light against the cold November darkness. This is your home? She asked. One of them, Kael said. He pressed a button on the dashboard. Massive iron gates swung open ahead of them. The spire is also the seat of the Pacific Northwest Court. My court. Court? Vampires, Kael said, pulling into a circular driveway paved with smooth river stones, are not the mindless monsters of human fiction. We have laws, structure, politics. I enforce those laws across 7 states and 2 Canadian provinces. The Order of St. George exists to destroy us. They've been hunting my kind for 800 years. He parked in front of carved oak doors that looked like they belonged on a cathedral. Killed the engine. Turned to face Lyra fully for the first time since leaving the garage. In the dome light of the car, she could see him clearly. He looked maybe 32 years old, the kind of handsome that belonged on magazine covers. But there was something ancient in his eyes, something that had seen empires rise and fall. Before we go inside, he said, I need to know, your grandmother, what was her name? Evangeline Ashwin. And her mother? I don't know. Grandma never talked about her family much. She said they were all dead. Kael nodded slowly. Evangeline would have been born in the 1940s, her mother in the 20s. Before that, the trail goes cold for me. But the locket doesn't lie, and neither do those words. He reached out slowly, giving Lyra time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he touched the rusted iron with one fingertip. The moment his skin made contact, he hissed and jerked back. Smoke rose from his fingertip. The smell of burned flesh filled the car. Iron, he said, examining the wound. It was already healing, the burned skin knitting back together in seconds. It burns us, weakens us. That locket has been protecting you this entire time, masking your scent, your heartbeat. That's why they couldn't find you until recently. Until I took it off, Lyra said quietly, to shower at the shelter. I only had it off for 5 minutes, but 5 minutes was enough. It sent out a signal, a beacon on the supernatural frequencies. Every vampire and hunter within 50 miles would have felt it. The Order found you first. Kael opened his door and stepped out into the rain. He moved around to Lyra's side and opened her door, offering his hand again. She took it. Let him help her out of the low-slung car. The rain soaked through her parka in seconds, but Kael didn't seem to notice the water. He led her to the oak doors, which opened before they reached them. A woman stood in the entrance. She was stunning, tall and willowy with platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. She wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than a car. Her eyes were ice blue and sharp as knives. Those eyes traveled over Lyra with visible disdain. "My lord," the woman said. Her voice was cultured, British accent refined. "You bring guests without warning?" "Stand aside, Seraphine," Kale said. Seraphine. The name sounded like winter. The woman didn't move. "She smells." Her lip curled. "Like refuse. Like streets and desperation. You brought a homeless human into our sanctuary?" "I brought the heir of Isolde," Kale said. His voice was cold enough to match hers. "And she is under my protection, by oath and blood. Now stand aside or I will move you myself." Something flickered in Seraphine's eyes. Anger, maybe fear. But she stepped back. Kael guided Lyra inside. The interior of the spire was breathtaking. Soaring ceilings, marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Abstract art that probably belonged in museums. A floating staircase that seemed to defy physics, leading to upper levels shrouded in artistic shadow. But Lyra barely noticed the beauty. She was focused on the people. There were 7 of them in the main hall, all beautiful, all watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. All vampires. Lyra could feel it, the cold that radiated from them, the way they moved too smoothly, too gracefully, the way their eyes tracked her like predators watching prey. "Council," Kale announced. "This is Lyra Ashwin, descendant of Isolde, the queen who died to preserve the peace treaty of 1724. She carries the oath marker and spoke the covenant phrase. I invoke the ancient law. She is under my protection." One of the vampires stepped forward. He was younger looking than Kale, maybe mid-20s in appearance. Dark hair artfully tousled. He wore designer jeans and a silk shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. When he smiled, it looked genuine. "Cassian Vale," he introduced himself, offering his hand to Lyra. "Second of the Pacific Northwest Court. Welcome to the Spire." His hand was cold like Kale's, but his grip was gentle, friendly. "You'll have to forgive Seraphine," Cassian continued, shooting a glance at the blonde woman. "She's not fond of surprises, or humans, or really anything that disrupts her carefully ordered world." "I'm not fond of filth," Seraphine said coldly, "and I'm certainly not fond of foolish sentimentality. My lord, this is clearly a ploy. Someone sent this girl to manipulate you, to exploit your guilt over Isolde's death." Kale's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You will show respect," he said quietly, "or you will leave." Seraphine's jaw tightened, but she bowed her head. "As you command." "I need the medical chamber prepared," Kale said to Cassian, "and bring Dr. Ashford. The girl needs to be examined." "Examined?" Lyra asked. Fear spiked through her. "I'm not sick. I need to understand how the Order found you," Kale interrupted gently. "And I need to know why that locket is resonating the way it is. The examination won't hurt, I promise." He guided her toward the floating staircase. Cassian followed. Seraphine stayed behind, her ice blue eyes burning holes in Lyra's back. The medical chamber was nothing like a hospital. It looked more like a high-end spa, all soft lighting and comfortable furniture. The examination table was padded leather. The equipment was sleek in silver, quietly humming. Dr. Ashford turned out to be a vampire who looked like someone's grandmother. She had silver hair in a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a white coat over a sensible cardigan. "Hello, dear," she said, smiling at Lyra. "I'm Dr. Ashford. I specialize in supernatural biology. I'm just going to run a few scans, take a small blood sample. Nothing invasive. Is that all right?" Lyra nodded, though her heart was pounding. Dr. Ashford worked quickly and efficiently. She ran something that looked like a metal detector over Lyra's body, pausing at the locket. Then she took a blood sample from Lyra's arm, her touch surprisingly warm for a vampire. While she worked, Kale stood by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Cassian lounged against the wall, watching everything with sharp intelligence behind his friendly demeanor. "My lord," Dr. Ashford said after several minutes, "the locket. May I examine it more closely?" Lyra's hand went to her throat protectively. "It won't leave your neck," Kyle said. "I give you my word." Reluctantly, Lyra lifted the locket from beneath her shirt, holding it out so Dr. Ashford could see. The doctor leaned close, not touching. Her eyes widened. "Extraordinary," she breathed. "This is old work. Pre-Enlightenment. The iron is forged with vampire blood mixed into the metal itself. Look here, Cassian. You can see the seal mark." Cassian moved closer, studying the locket. His expression grew serious. "That's your blood seal, my lord," he said. "I'd recognize your signature anywhere." 300 years ago, Kale said softly. I gave Isolde a locket containing a single drop of my blood. It was meant to protect her, to mask her human scent from other vampires, to keep her safe while we tried to broker peace between our kinds. It didn't work, Lyra said quietly. No, Kale's voice was heavy with old grief. She died anyway, and I thought the locket died with her. The seal is cracked, Dr. Ashford said, pointing to a hairline fracture in the iron. Probably happened decades ago. That's why it's been emitting a faint signal. Every time she removes it, the crack widens slightly, and the signal grows stronger. Can you repair it? Kale asked. I can, but it will require fresh blood, yours, and it will create a significant energy spike when the seal is reforged. Every supernatural creature within 100 miles will feel it. Then we do it tonight, Kale said, before the Order can organize a larger force. My lord, Cassian said carefully, if we create that kind of spike, we'll be broadcasting our location. It could be seen as an act of aggression by the other courts, or an invitation to attack. I don't care. Kale turned from the window. The oath must be honored. Lyra is under my protection. If that means war, then we have war. Lyra stared at him, this stranger who had knelt before her in a parking garage, who was willing to risk war to keep her safe. Why, she asked. You don't know me. You didn't know my grandmother. Why does this oath matter so much? Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because Isolde died saving me. Not just my life, my soul. 300 years ago, I was a different creature. Colder, crueler. She taught me that vampires could be more than monsters. That we could choose mercy, choose protection instead of predation. When she died, I swore I would never let her bloodline suffer. That if any of her descendants needed me, I would come. I would protect them, even if it cost me everything. He met Lyra's eyes. You are not a stranger, Lyra Ashwin. You are the last piece of the woman who changed everything, and I will die before I let anyone harm you. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of medical equipment, Doctor. Ashford cleared her throat gently. There's one more thing, my lord. The blood scan shows something unusual. She brought up a holographic display. Lyra's blood cells floated in the air, magnified thousands of times. They looked normal to Lyra's untrained eye. Look here, Dr. Ashford said, pointing to a cluster of cells that glowed faintly blue. This is a recessive genetic marker, extremely rare. It's called the sanguine heir gene. I've only read about it in historical texts, never seen it in person. What does it do? Cassian asked. It allows the carrier to bond with vampire blood at a cellular level, to share power, to amplify it. In the old days, human consorts with this gene were considered sacred. They could transform a vampire's abilities, make them stronger, more dangerous. Kale stared at the hologram. Isolde had this gene? She must have. And she passed it down. It's been dormant in the bloodline for generations. But Lyra has it, active, functional. Seraphine's voice came from the doorway. Lyra hadn't heard her enter. How convenient, the blonde vampire said coldly. The homeless waif just happens to be genetically compatible with our king. This reeks of manipulation. Enough, Seraphine, Kale snapped. No, my lord, not enough. You're being played. Someone knew about this girl's bloodline, knew about the gene. They sent her here to exploit your guilt, to get close to you. I didn't ask to be here, Lyra said. Her voice was shaking but loud. I didn't ask for any of this. I was happy being invisible, safe being nobody. But men in gray suits tried to kill me, and now I'm standing in a mansion full of vampires being told my blood is special. I don't want to be special. I want to go home. You don't have a home, Seraphine said cruelly. That's the point, isn't it? You're desperate, homeless, easy to manipulate. That's enough, Kale's voice cracked like a whip. Leave now. Seraphine's eyes flashed with anger, but she turned and left, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Cassian sighed. She's scared, he said quietly. Change terrifies her. And you haven't shown interest in anyone since Isolde. This girl represents a threat to the status quo. This girl, Kale said, is not a threat. She's a person who's been through hell and deserves our protection, not our suspicion. He turned to Lyra, his expression softened. You're right, you didn't ask for this. And you're free to leave whenever you wish. But I meant what I said. The Order of St. George won't stop hunting you. They've seen you now. They know you're connected to me. If you walk out those doors, you'll be dead within a week. And if I stay, Lyra asked, if you stay, I will protect you, train you, help you understand what you are. And when it's safe, when the order has been dealt with, you can decide what you want to do with your life. No obligations, no debts. Just a chance to survive. Lyra looked at this vampire king, this ancient creature who had knelt before her, who looked at her like she mattered. No one had looked at her like that in 3 years. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Kale nodded. Relief flickered across his face, there and gone in an instant. Dr. Ashford will show you to a room. Get some rest. Tomorrow we begin. As Lyra followed the doctor out of the medical chamber, she touched the locket at her throat. The debt remains unpaid until the last winter falls. She was beginning to understand what that meant. And she was beginning to suspect that winter was just beginning. Lyra woke up screaming, her hands clawed at invisible attackers. Men in gray suits, footsteps in the rain, the cold muzzle of a gun pressed against her temple. But her hands didn't hit concrete. They tangled in sheets that felt like water. Egyptian cotton, thread count so high it was probably illegal. She sat up gasping. Sweat soaked through the silk pajamas someone had left for her. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Seattle skyline wrapped in pre-dawn fog. The Space Needle glowed in the distance like a lighthouse. The bed she'd slept in could have fit 5 people. The furniture looked like it belonged in a palace. You're safe. Lyra jerked her head toward the voice. Cale Ravencroft sat in a wingback chair by the window, reading a leather-bound book that looked older than America. He'd changed out of his suit. Now he wore black slacks and a cashmere sweater the color of charcoal. He looked less like a corporate predator and more like something from a Gothic novel. Still beautiful. Still dangerous. How long have you been sitting there? Lyra asked. Her voice was rough from screaming. 3 hours. You were restless. I thought you might wake frightened. So you just watched me sleep? I stood guard. Ko closed the book. There's a difference. Lyra pulled the blanket around herself. The locket rested against her sternum, warm as always. What time is it? 4 in the morning. You've been asleep for 14 hours. 14 hours. Lyra couldn't remember the last time she'd slept that long. At shelters, you learn to sleep light. Wake at any sound. Stay ready to run. Dr. Ashford said your body was in mild shock, Kale continued. Exhaustion, malnutrition, dehydration. She wanted to put you on an IV, but I told her you'd be more comfortable resting naturally. Thank you. Kale stood, moved to a side table where a crystal pitcher sat beside a glass. He poured water and brought it to her. His hand was cold when their fingers touched as she took the glass. The ritual, Lyra said, after drinking half the water in 3 gulps. Dr. Ashford said we need to do it tonight, to reseal the locket. Yes. And it's going to send out some kind of signal? Alert every vampire and hunter in the city? Not just the city, the region, possibly farther. Kale sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. When I sealed that locket 300 years ago, I was younger, weaker. The energy signature was subtle, but I'm stronger now. The seal will be permanent, unbreakable, and very, very loud. So we're painting a target on our backs. We're painting a target on my back, Kale corrected. You'll be safe here. The spire has defenses that would make Fort Knox jealous, reinforced walls, UV shielding, weapons systems. The Order has tried to breach it 17 times in the last century. They've failed every time. Lyra set the glass on the nightstand. The Order, who are they really? Why do they want to kill vampires? Kale was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, remembering. 800 years ago, during the Crusades, a group of knights discovered that vampires were real. They believed we were demons, abominations. They swore to eradicate us from the earth. They called themselves the Order of St. George, after the saint who slew the dragon. He stood, walked to the window. His reflection in the glass was faint, ghostly. For centuries they hunted us, burned us, staked us, drove us into hiding. But vampires adapted. We learned to blend in, to use human law and human wealth to protect ourselves. We created the masquerade, the illusion that we don't exist. And for a while it worked. What changed? Lyra asked. Technology, thermal imaging, DNA analysis, satellite surveillance. It's harder to hide now. The Order adapted too. They became more sophisticated, more funded, more dangerous. They operate in cells, gray suits, silver weapons. They look like government agents or corporate security. No one questions them. And they want me dead because you're connected to me, Because your bloodline represents a bridge between human and vampire. Because the sanguine heir gene makes you valuable, and the order destroys anything valuable to us. Kale turned from the window. His amber eyes found hers in the dimness. But they won't touch you. I promise you that. Lyra believed him, and that scared her more than the order did. Breakfast was served in a dining room with a table that could seat 20. Lyra sat alone at one end, staring at more food than she'd seen in months. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs Benedict, bacon, sausage, 3 kinds of juice, coffee that smelled like heaven. She ate slowly at first, then faster. Her stomach had shrunk from years of irregular meals, but she couldn't stop. Everything tasted so good, so real. Hungry? Cassian Vale slid into the chair across from her. He wore jeans and a vintage band t-shirt. He looked young, friendly, nothing like the ancient vampire he actually was. Starving, Lyra admitted around a mouthful of croissant. I remember that feeling, from before I was turned. Human hunger. It's different from vampire hunger. Simpler. Cassian poured himself coffee, even though Lyra suspected he didn't need it. How are you holding up? Yesterday was a lot. I'm okay. Liar. But he smiled when he said it. It's okay to be terrified. This world you've stumbled into? It's bigger and darker than you can imagine. But Kale's the best protection you could ask for. He doesn't break his promises. You've known him a long time? 160 years. He turned me during the Civil War. I was dying of gangrene in a field hospital. He gave me a choice. Die human or live as something else. I chose life. Cassian's expression went distant. Best decision I ever made. He taught me everything. How to survive. How to hunt without killing. How to exist in the human world without being discovered. He's more than my king. He's my brother. There was genuine affection in Cassian's voice. Loyalty. Lyra relaxed slightly. What's going to happen today? She asked. Today, you rest. Recover. Tonight, the ritual. Kale's already preparing the library. It's the most secure room in the spire. Stone walls, no windows, warded against magical intrusion. Whatever happens when that seal is reforged, we'll be ready. And after? Cassian's smile faded. After, we see who comes knocking. Lyra spent the afternoon exploring the spire. It was impossible to get truly lost. The layout was too logical, but she wandered anyway, trying to understand this place that was supposed to keep her safe. The architecture was stunning. Modern minimalism mixed with Gothic touches. Stone archways, vaulted ceilings, but also clean lines. Glass, light. She found a library that could have swallowed her entire childhood home. A gym that looked like something from a science fiction movie. An indoor pool that glowed with underwater lights. And everywhere, vampires. They watched her, some with curiosity, some with suspicion. One, a male vampire with scars across his face, looked at her like she was dinner. She hurried past him. She was heading back to her room when she heard crying. Not adult crying, a child. The sound came from behind a closed door at the end of a hallway. Lyra knew she should keep walking, mind her own business, but the crying sounded so broken, so lost. She opened the door. The room inside was sparse, a bedroom but bare. No decorations, no warmth, just a bed and a small figure huddled in the corner. A girl. She looked maybe 8 years old, dark hair tangled around a face streaked with tears. She wore a white nightgown that was too big, sleeves hanging past her hands. When she saw Lyra, she hissed. Her eyes flashed red, fangs dropped. Hey, Lyra said softly. She didn't move into the room, just stood in the doorway. I'm not going to hurt you. The girl hissed again. She pressed herself tighter into the corner, as if trying to disappear into the wall. What are you doing? Lyra turned. Seraphine Blackthorn stood in the hallway, ice blue eyes narrowed. I heard crying, Lyra said. And you thought you'd interfere? That child is feral. She was turned against her will. Rogue vampire. We've been trying to rehabilitate her for weeks. She attacks anyone who gets close. She's scared. She's dangerous. She's a child. Lyra looked back at the little girl. Something in those red eyes looked familiar. The fear, the feeling of being trapped with no way out. What's her name? We don't know. She won't speak. Lyra turned back to the girl. Slowly she sat down in the doorway, not entering the room, just being present. My name's Lyra, she said quietly. I'm scared too. I don't understand what's happening. Everything's too big and too strange, and I don't know if I'm safe here. The hissing stopped. I used to sleep in alleys, Lyra continued, behind dumpsters, under bridges, anywhere I could hide. I was always cold, always hungry, always scared someone would hurt me. Do you know that feeling? The girl's eyes were still red, but she was listening. I had a grandmother once. She used to sing to me when I was scared. Would you like me to sing for you? Seraphine made a disgusted sound. This is ridiculous. You can't. Let her try. Kale's voice. He stood behind Seraphine, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable. Lyra didn't wait for permission. She started humming. The lullaby her grandmother had sung. Simple melody, wordless, just sound and comfort. The girl's fangs retracted slowly. The red faded from her eyes, replaced by brown, human brown. She started crying again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was grief. Lyra kept humming, kept sitting in the doorway, not approaching, just offering presence. After 5 minutes, the little girl stood up. She walked across the room on shaking legs, stopped just inside the doorway. Then she fell into Lyra's arms. Lyra caught her, held her. This tiny vampire child who weighed almost nothing, who shook with sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped inside for weeks. It's okay, Lyra whispered. I've got you. You're safe. The girl clung to her like a drowning person clings to driftwood. Kale's voice was soft when he spoke. Her name was Emma. She was 8 when a rogue turned her in an alley in Portland. He was killed before he could explain how to survive. She's been alone, terrified, unable to understand what she's become. She needs help, Lyra said. Not rehabilitation. Help. I know. Kale crouched down beside them. His voice gentled even more. Emma, can you hear me? The girl nodded against Lyra's shoulder. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. Lyra will stay with you as long as you need. Is that acceptable? Another nod. Kale stood. He looked at Lyra over the child's head. Something in his expression had shifted, softened. The court has tried for 3 weeks to reach her, he said quietly. Vampire empathy, blood bonds, compulsion, nothing worked. But you just sat down and sang. I know what it's like to be invisible, Lyra said. To feel like no one sees you. Sometimes people don't need power. They just need someone to sit with them in the dark. Kale's eyes held hers. In that moment, Lyra saw something she hadn't before. Recognition. Understanding. Your value isn't your bloodline, Wendy said. It's this, your humanity. Isolde had it too. The ability to see people. Really see them. Even when they're monsters. Seraphine made a sound of disgust and swept away down the hall. Kale smiled faintly. You've made an enemy. I've had worse. I believe you. He glanced at his watch. It's almost sunset. The ritual begins in 3 hours. Dr. Ashford will take over with Emma. You should prepare. Lyra nodded, but she didn't let go of the little girl until Emma was ready to let go first. The library was different at night. Candles burned in iron sconces along the stone walls, casting dancing shadows across shelves that held books older than countries. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to roast a whole pig. The room smelled of wood smoke and old leather and something else. Something metallic. Magic. Lyra felt it prickling along her skin like static electricity. Kale stood before the fire, arranging items on a low table. A silver bowl, dried herbs, a knife that looked ancient and cruel. He changed into simpler clothes. Black pants, black shirt, no jewelry except for a ring on his right hand, silver set with a dark stone. That's Isolde's ring, Lyra said, surprised she knew. Kale glanced at it. Yes, she wore it the night she died. I've worn it every day since. He turned back to his preparations. The ritual is simple. I'll cut my palm, let the blood drip onto the locket. When the iron heats, you'll place your hand over mine. The bond will seal. The crack will close. And every supernatural creature within 500 miles will know exactly where we are. You make it sound so easy. The mechanics are easy. The consequences less so. Kale picked up the knife, tested the edge with his thumb. Blood welled instantly, black in the candlelight. The cut healed before a drop could fall. The order will come. Other vampire courts will feel the power surge. Some may see it as an act of aggression, a declaration of strength. Is it? No, it's a promise that I will honor my oaths, even if it costs me everything. Lyra touched the locket at her throat. It was warm, pulsing almost, like a second heartbeat. What did Isolde mean to you? She asked. Really? Kale set down the knife, stared into the fire. Everything, he said quietly. I was turned in 1633, during a war that tore Europe apart. The vampire who made me was cruel. He taught me that humans were food, resources, nothing more. For almost a century, I believed him. I killed without thought, fed without mercy. I was a monster in truth. He picked up the bowl, turned it in his hands. Then I met Isolde, 1720. She was the daughter of a merchant. No title, no great beauty, but she saw me for what I was and didn't run. She asked me questions about what it felt like to be immortal, whether I remembered being human, if I ever got lonely. Kale's voice cracked slightly. No one had asked me that in 100 years. No one cared if a monster got lonely. But she did. She looked at me and saw a person, not a predator, and slowly she changed me, made me remember what it meant to be human, good, capable of more than just hunger. You loved her. I did, not romantically. She was married, had children. But I loved her the way you love someone who saves your soul, who reminds you that you're more than the worst thing you've ever done. Kale set down the bowl, faced Lara fully. She died negotiating a peace treaty between vampires and humans. A secret accord that would have changed history. But some vampires didn't want peace. They wanted war, domination. They poisoned her, made it look like fever. By the time I realized what had happened, she was dying. And all I could do was make her a promise. That her bloodline would always have my protection. That I would never forget what she taught me. He held out his hand. So yes, Lyra, this ritual matters. You matter. Not because of your blood, but because you're the last piece of someone who made me want to be better than I am. Lyra took his hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was gentle. I'm ready, she said. Kale picked up the knife. This will hurt me, he warned. Silver burns, but I need the pain. It focuses the magic, makes the seal stronger. He pressed the blade to his palm and cut deep. He didn't make a sound, but Lyra saw his jaw clench, saw the way his hand trembled and his blood, dark as ink, welled from the wound. He made a fist over the locket, held it there, suspended, while Lyra held the iron steady. The blood dripped. 1 drop, 2, 3. When it hit the rusted iron, the locket hissed. Steam rose, smelling of copper and ozone. The rust began to dissolve, flaking away like old paint. Beneath it, the iron was black, pure, gleaming. Now, Kale said through gritted teeth, place your hand over mine. Lyra reached out. Her hand looked small compared to his. Fragile, she pressed her palm against the back of his fist. The world exploded. Not physically, but inside her, behind her eyes, a rush of images and sensations that weren't hers. She saw through Kale's eyes, saw Isolde, a woman with kind eyes and dark hair streaked with gray. She was dying, her skin fever pale, her breathing shallow. But she smiled at Kale, reached up to touch his face. Promise me, she whispered. The debt remains unpaid until the last winter falls. Protect them. My daughters, my granddaughters, all of them. Promise. I promise, Kale choked out. And he was crying, tears like blood running down his marble face. The vision shifted. Lara saw other memories. Kale as a young man, human, dying on a battlefield. The vampire who turned him, cruel and beautiful. 100 years of darkness, of killing, of becoming something inhuman. Then Isolde again, asking questions, making him laugh, reminding him what kindness felt like. The memory of her death. Not fever, murder. A vampire lord with eyes like ice, forcing poison down her throat while Carol was away. We cannot have peace. Humans are cattle, nothing more. The rage, the grief, the 300 years of guilt that followed. But then the memories shifted again, and Lyra realized Kyle was seeing her memories too. Her childhood, her grandmother's death, the 3 years on the streets, the cold, the hunger. The night she'd been cornered by 3 men in an alley and had to fight her way out with a broken bottle. The shelters that turned her away. The jobs she couldn't get because she had no address. The way people looked through her like she was glass. The way she'd learned to be invisible because it hurt less than being seen and still rejected. Emma's crying face. The way Lyra had sat in the doorway and just been present. Because sometimes that's all anyone needs, to know they're not alone. Kale gasped. His hand tightened over hers. The locket between them glowed white hot, bright as a star. The cracks sealed with a sound like thunder. Then the light faded. Kale and Lyra knelt on the floor together, hands still joined, breathing hard. The ritual was complete. But something had changed. Kale looked at her with eyes that held recognition. understanding. He'd seen all of her, every dark corner, every survival instinct, every moment of strength and breaking. And she'd seen him. The monster, the man, the creature torn between what he was and what he wanted to be. Lyra, he whispered. His voice was raw. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain what had just passed between them. Something deeper than words, deeper than blood, a bond. Then the alarm started screaming. Red light flooded the library. A klaxon blared loud enough to rattle the ancient books on their shelves. Kale was on his feet instantly, pulling Lyra up with him. "What's happening?" she shouted over the noise. "They're here." Kale's eyes had gone full amber, glowing in the red emergency lighting. The order, faster than I expected. The library doors burst open. Cassian ran in, dressed in tactical gear, a sword strapped to his back. 50 of them, he panted. Full assault team, UV grenades, silver ammunition, flamethrowers. They're hitting the perimeter now. We have maybe 5 minutes before they breach the walls. Impossible, Kale snarled. The defenses should hold for hours. Someone opened the north gate from the inside. Kale went very still. Who? Cassian's face was grim. I don't know, but we have a traitor. Before Kale could respond, an explosion rocked the entire building. The floor bucked. Plaster rained from the ceiling. The fire in the hearth guttered and died. Stay here, Kale commanded, already moving toward the door. Cassian, guard her with your life. My lord, you can't fight them all alone. I can and I will. They will not touch her. He was gone in a blur of speed. Lyra stood frozen, the alarm still screaming, the red lights still flashing. Cassian moved to the door, drawing his sword. It'll be okay, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Kael's the strongest vampire in the region. He'll cut through them like paper. Another explosion, closer this time. The windows rattled despite being bulletproof. Cassian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His expression went flat. What? Lyra asked. Nothing, just coordinates. The assault is concentrated on the east wing. He turned to her, smiled, but the smile was wrong, too sharp. You should know, Lyra, I really did like you. You have heart, more than most vampires I've known. It's a shame. What are you talking about? Cassian moved. Faster than her eyes could track. 1 second he was by the door. The next he had her by the throat, lifted off the ground, slamming her back against the stone wall. Her feet dangled. She couldn't breathe. The ritual worked perfectly, Cassian said conversationally. Big energy spike. Every hunter in the state felt it. I made sure they were ready, positioned, waiting. Lyra clawed at his hand. Her vision started to gray at the edges. You, she choked out. Traitor. Realist, Cassian corrected. Kale is weak. He clings to old promises, old morality. He protects humans like they're something precious instead of food. I've watched him for 160 years, and he's never been strong enough to do what needs to be done. Take control. Rule. He leaned closer. His breath was cold against her face. But with you dead, the oath is broken. Isolde's bloodline ends, and Kael will finally have nothing left to make him weak. He'll be the monster he's supposed to be, and I'll be at his right hand, guiding him, shaping him. Kael will kill you, Lyra gasped. Kael will never know. I'll blame the Order. Say they broke through before I could stop them. Say I fought valiantly, but you died in the crossfire. He'll grieve, then he'll rage, and that rage will make him unstoppable. Cassian's grip tightened. Lyra's lungs burned. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. This was it. After everything. After surviving 3 years on the streets. After finding something like safety. She was going to die in a library, killed by a man pretending to be an ally. Her hand scrabbled at her throat. Touched the locket. Still warm, still pulsing. The debt remains unpaid. Lyra stopped fighting Cassian's grip. Instead, she grabbed the locket, yanked it hard. The leather cord snapped, and she drove the iron into Cassian's eye. He screamed, a sound of pure agony that drowned out the alarms. Dropped her instantly, staggering back, clawing at his face. Iron-burned vampires. And Lyra had just stabbed a chunk of it directly into his brain. She hit the ground hard, gasped for air, scrambled away on hands and knees. Cassian ripped the locket from his eye socket, threw it across the room. His face was a ruin. The flesh around the wound was smoking, blackened, melting. You little bitch, he hissed. The wound wasn't healing. Iron poisoning. I'll make this slow. I'll make you beg. He started toward her. Then the library doors exploded inward. But it wasn't Kael. It was worse. Men in gray suits, order hunters, 6 of them, armed with silver-tipped assault rifles and eyes that held nothing but hate. They saw Lyra, saw Cassian, and opened fire. Silver bullets tore through the air. Cassian moved with desperate speed, using his vampire reflexes to dodge. But he was wounded. Slow. A bullet caught him in the shoulder. He spun, fell. Lyra ran, not toward the hunters, toward the only exit she could see, the window. It was bulletproof, reinforced. But she grabbed a heavy iron candlestick from the table and swung with all her strength. The glass spiderwebbed. Didn't break. Behind her, Cassian was fighting. She heard the wet sounds of violence. Dreaming, Lyra swung again. The window cracked. Again. It shattered. Cold night air rushed in, carrying rain and the sound of battle from below. She looked down. 3 stories up. A drop that would kill her. But staying meant certain death. Lyra closed her eyes. Thought of her grandmother. Of Emma. Of Kyle looking at her like she mattered. She jumped. For one perfect moment, she was weightless. Flying, free. Then gravity remembered her. She fell toward the garden below, toward the stone path that would break every bone in her body. Something slammed into her midair. Arms, cold and strong. A body wrapping around hers, twisting, taking the impact. They hit the ground together. Rolled. Came to rest in the wet grass. Lyra looked up into amber eyes. KL. Covered in blood that wasn't his. Breathing hard. Holding her like she was made of glass. I heard you scream, he said. His voice was shaking. I heard. An explosion tore through the night. Lyra looked up at the spire in time to see the entire east wing erupt in flames. The concussion wave hit seconds later, hot enough to scorch. The building groaned, tilted, started to collapse. Cassian, Kale breathed. He planted bombs. He betrayed you, Lyra said. He's working with the Order. He tried to kill me. Something broke in Kale's expression. Rage, betrayal, grief. But there was no time. The spire was falling, tons of glass and steel and stone sliding off the cliff edge like an avalanche. Kale scooped Lyra into his arms and ran. They made it into the tree line before the building hit bottom. The sound was apocalyptic, a roar like the end of the world. Then silence. Lyra looked back. The spire was gone, just rubble and fire and smoke rising into the rain. My home, Kale whispered. 300 years. Gone. He was still holding her. His arms trembled. Not from weakness, from emotion. Are you hurt? He asked. I'm okay. You? I'll heal. But he didn't let her go. They stood in the rain, in the trees, watching the only sanctuary Lyra had ever known burn. Where do we go? She asked. Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened, set her gently on her feet. I have a bunker. Old Prohibition-era smuggling tunnel. Half a mile from here. We go there. We regroup. And then we make them pay. His eyes were glowing so bright they lit the darkness. All of them. The bunker was exactly what it sounded like. Concrete walls, bare bulbs, the smell of stale air and old secrets. But in the center, like a sleeping beast, sat a car, a 1969 Ford Mustang, matte black, looking like violence given form. Kale stumbled as they entered, caught himself against the car. That's when Lyra saw the wound, a piece of rebar, silver-coated, protruding from his left shoulder. It must have hit him during the explosion. The flesh around it was black, rotting. Oh God, Lyra breathed. It's nothing, Kale said. But his voice was weak, his skin had gone gray. That's not nothing, that's silver poisoning. It's stopping my healing. He tried to smile, failed. I've had worse. He collapsed. Lyra caught him, barely. He was heavy, all muscle and bone and immortal weight. She managed to guide him down to the concrete floor, propping him against the bunker wall. His eyes were flickering, amber to hazel and back, the glow dying. You need to pull it out, he said. I can't. I'm not a doctor. I'll kill you. I'm already dying. Kale grabbed her hand. His grip was weak. Listen to me. Silver stops our regeneration. The longer it stays in, the more poison spreads. You have to remove it. Now. Lyra looked at the metal spike. It was lodged deep, near the bone. Pulling it would cause massive damage, but leaving it would kill him. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She found a bottle of bourbon on a shelf, poured it over her hands, over the wound. Kale didn't even flinch. Bad sign. She gripped the rebar with both hands. It was cold, slick with blood. On 3, she said. 1, 2. She didn't wait for 3. She pulled. Kyle screamed. It was a sound of pure agony. Inhuman. The sound of something ancient and powerful being torn apart. The rebar came free with a wet, sucking sound. Blood poured from the wound, black and thick. Lyra threw the metal across the bunker, grabbed a towel from the emergency supplies, pressed it hard against the wound. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "Kale, stay with me." His breathing was ragged. His eyes rolled back. But slowly, so slowly, the wound began to close. The black flesh turned gray, then pale, then white. Healing. Finally healing. Kale's eyes focused on her. Still amber, but dimming to something softer. "You saved me," he whispered. Lyra laughed. It came out as a song. "You saved me first, in the garden, caught me. I heard you scream. Nothing else mattered. Not the battle, not the order. Just you." He reached up, touched her face with a hand that was still trembling. 300 years, he said. "I've been alone, isolated by power and immortality. Even surrounded by my court, I was alone. But you sat in a doorway and sang to a broken child. You walked into fire to save me. You're not just Isolde's heir. I'm tired of being invisible," Lyra interrupted. Her voice was stronger now, certain. "For 3 years I was a ghost. People looked through me, but not anymore. I see you, Kyle, and you see me, and I'm not running. Not from the Order, not from Cassian, not from any of this." Kale stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Wonder. Hope. "Then we fight," he said. "Together." "Together," Lyra agreed. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks. Police. The human world responding to the destruction of the spire. But inside the bunker, Lyra and Kale sat together on the cold concrete floor. Two broken people who had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. The debt was far from paid. But for the first time in 300 years, Kyle wasn't alone. And for the first time in 3 years, Lyra wasn't invisible. Winter was coming, but they would face it together. The rain had finally stopped. Dawn came gray and cold over Seattle, painting the wreckage of the spire in harsh light. Emergency vehicles crowded the cliff road. Firefighters sprayed foam on smoldering ruins. News helicopters circled like vultures. Inside the bunker, Lyra sat on the hood of the Mustang, watching Kale pace. He'd healed. The silver wound was gone, leaving only a faint scar that would fade within hours. But the betrayal hadn't healed. She could see it in the way he moved. Restless, angry, grief hardening into something sharper. "Cassian planned this for months," Kale said. His voice was flat, dead. "Maybe years, the access codes, the explosives, the timing. He knew exactly when to strike." "He said you were weak," Lyra said quietly, "that protecting humans made you vulnerable." He was right. Kale stopped pacing, looked at her with eyes that had gone cold. "I trusted him, gave him power, position. I made him second in command because I thought loyalty meant something. I was a fool." "You weren't a fool, you were human. Even vampires can be human." Kale's laugh was bitter. "Human? Is that what got Isolde killed? What got my home destroyed? What nearly got you murdered in my own library?" He slammed his fist into the concrete wall. The bunker shook. Cracks spiderwebbed from the impact. Lyra slid off the car, walked to him, put her hand on his arm. His skin was cold as marble. "Kale, look at me." He did, and she saw the rage there, the guilt, the 300-year-old wound that Cassian had ripped open. "Cassian made his choice," Lyra said. "You made yours. You chose to honor your promises, to be more than a monster. That's not weakness, that's strength. Strength doesn't stop silver bullets. No, but it stops you from becoming what he wanted, a creature that rules through fear instead of respect, through domination instead of protection." She held his gaze. "You saved me, twice. You could have let me die in that parking garage, could have drained me and walked away. But you didn't, because Isolde taught you to see people, and that matters." Kale was quiet for a long moment, then something in his expression softened. "You sound like her," he said, "Isolde. She used to say things like that. Make me believe I could be better. You are better, and we're going to prove it." "How? The spire is destroyed. Half my court is dead or scattered. The Order knows where I am. And Cassian?" His voice cracked. "Cassian has won." Lyra shook her head. "No, he hasn't. He made a mistake." "What mistake?" "He left us alive." By late afternoon, they were ready to move. The 1969 Mustang roared through the industrial district like a demon on wheels. Cale drove with controlled violence, taking corners too fast, pushing the ancient engine to its limits. Lyra gripped the dashboard. She'd traded her ruined pajamas for clothes Cale had stored in the bunker. Black jeans, a gray sweater, combat boots that were too big, but better than duct-tape sneakers. She looked like someone who could fight. She felt like someone about to walk into hell. "Where are we going?" she asked over the engine's growl. "Pioneer Square. Underground. There's a bar that caters to my kind. Neutral ground. If anyone knows what happened after the explosion, it's Marcus Stonehaven. Can we trust him?" Marcus is 700 years old. He's seen empires fall. He doesn't care about politics or power. He just wants to be left alone with his whiskey collection. But he hates traitors more than he hates anything else in this world. They pulled into an alley behind a brick building that looked condemned. Cale killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "Stay close," he said. "Underground Seattle can be dangerous even for vampires." They descended a staircase that shouldn't have existed. It was hidden behind a dumpster, the entrance so narrow Lyra had to turn sideways. The stairs went down, and down, and down. At the bottom was a steel door. Cale knocked. 3 times. Pause. Twice more. The door opened. The bar beyond was dim and smoky, lit by red neon signs advertising beers that didn't exist anymore. Jazz played softly from a jukebox in the corner. The air smelled of old wood and older secrets. Behind the bar stood a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a Viking saga. Massive, shoulders like a linebacker, gray beard braided with silver rings, tattoos covering every inch of visible skin. He was polishing a glass with a rag that had seen better decades. "You're supposed to be dead, Ravencroft," Marcus Stonehaven said without looking up. His voice was gravel in a cement mixer. "Saw it on the news. Gas explosion. Tragic loss. Seattle's most eligible billionaire gone in a ball of fire. I'm harder to kill than that." Marcus looked up. His eyes were pale blue, the color of winter ice. They took in Kyle, then Lyra. "And you brought the girl, the one everyone's talking about. Isolde's heir." He set down the glass. "Word travels fast in our world, especially when someone lights up the night with a blood ritual that could be felt in Vancouver." "What have you heard?" Cale asked. Marcus poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a clean glass, slid it across the bar to Cale. "I heard Cassian Vale called an emergency council 30 minutes after the spire fell. Said you died in the attack. Said the order broke through your defenses and you sacrificed yourself fighting them off. Very heroic. Very tragic." Cale's hand tightened on the glass. And he's holding a coronation tonight, Obsidian Hall. Says the Pacific Northwest Court can't be without a king. Says he'll take the burden. Reluctantly, of course, with deep sorrow and heavy heart. How many support him? Marcus shrugged, around. Most of the court. They're scared. The order's been hitting vampire strongholds up and down the coast. Portland, Vancouver, Spokane. 3 courts destroyed in the last week. People want a strong leader. Someone who'll fight back. Cassian's promising war. Protection. A return to the old ways when vampires didn't hide. "He's lying," Lyra said. "He's working with the order. He's the one who gave them the access codes, who planted the bombs." Marcus looked at her with new interest. "You got proof of that, little girl?" "I have his confession. He told me himself before he tried to kill me. Your word against his. In a court of law, that's worth nothing. In a court of vampires?" Marcus smiled without humor. "Even less." Cale drained the whiskey in one swallow, set the glass down with careful precision. "How many are loyal to me?" 12, maybe 15 if you count the ones sitting on the fence. Everyone else is either dead, scattered, or willing to follow whoever promises them safety. 12 against 200. Bad odds. I've had worse. Cale looked at Marcus. "Will you stand with me?" The old vampire was quiet. He poured himself whiskey, drank it slowly. "I don't like politics," he said finally. "I don't like courts and kings and all the posturing that comes with it. I've been alive long enough to see 1,000 leaders rise and fall. Most of them were bastards. Some were worse." He poured another glass. "But you, Ravencroft, you're different. You actually give a damn about the cattle, about the treaties, about keeping the masquerade intact so we don't end up in a war that kills us all. And Cassian, he's a snake. Always has been. Smiled too much, agreed too easily. I never trusted him." Marcus came around the bar, pulled an antique shotgun from underneath, checked the load. "So yeah, I'll stand with you, even if it's suicide. Better to die standing than live kneeling to that smug little weasel. Cale extended his hand. Thank you. Marcus shook it. His grip could have crushed stone. Don't thank me yet. We still have to live through the next 4 hours. The Obsidian Hall sat beneath the Space Needle, hidden in tunnels that predated the city itself. It had been a speakeasy during Prohibition, a vampire haven for 200 years. Now it was about to become a battlefield. Cale parked the Mustang 3 blocks away. They approached on foot, Lyra between Cale and Marcus, moving through shadows that seemed to cling to them like silk. Other vampires were converging on the hall. Lyra could see them now, her eyes adjusting to this new reality. They moved differently than humans. Too smooth, too graceful. Predators pretending to be people. Most ignored her. A few stared. One, a female vampire with scars across her throat, hissed as they passed. Marcus growled low in his chest. The scarred vampire backed away. How do we get in? Lyra asked. Won't there be guards? There will be, but they won't stop us. Vampire law. Any member of the court can attend a coronation. They can't bar entry without declaring war on the entire bloodline. So we just walk in? We walk in, make an entrance, challenge Cassian's claim, and hope we're not torn apart before we can speak. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. And if we are? Cale looked down at her. His amber eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Then we die knowing we tried, that we didn't let a traitor steal what we built. Not exactly comforting, but Lyra nodded. They reached the entrance, a loading dock door that looked like it hadn't been opened in 50 years. Cale knocked, the same pattern he'd used at Marcus's bar. The door opened. The vampire on the other side was young, maybe turned in his 20s. He wore tactical gear and carried an automatic weapon that probably fired silver rounds. His eyes widened when he saw Kyle. Lord Ravencroft. But you're alive, yes. Surprising, I know. We're here for the coronation. The guard looked past Kyle to Marcus, then to Lyra. His expression was unreadable. I have to announce you. Then announce us. The guard spoke into a radio, waited, listened to a response Lyra couldn't hear. Then he stepped aside. You may enter, but leave your weapons. Marcus snorted. We are the weapons, boy. They walked past him into darkness. The Obsidian Hall was carved from black stone that seemed to drink light. Columns rose to a vaulted ceiling, lost in shadow. Candles burned in iron sconces, thousands of them, casting dancing shadows across walls covered in ancient tapestries. And vampires. 200 of them. Maybe more. They filled the hall, standing in clusters, all dressed in formal wear, like they were attending an opera instead of a coronation. All eyes turned as Kyle entered. The silence was absolute. Then the whispers started, a susurrus of voices speaking too fast and too quiet for Lyra to follow, but she caught fragments. Supposed to be dead. The spire burned. Brought the human. At the far end of the hall on a raised platform stood a golden chalice on a pedestal, the coronation cup. Beside it stood Cassian Vale. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His expression was one of surprised concern. He was a good actor. Lyra had to give him that. Lord Ravencroft, Cassian said, his voice carrying across the hall. Thank the fates you are alive. When the spire fell, we feared the worst. We thought... You thought I was dead, Cale interrupted, his voice cutting through the hall like a blade. Because you were there when the bombs went off. You triggered them yourself. The whispers grew louder. Cassian's expression didn't change. Still concerned, still confused. My lord, you've been through trauma. The silver poisoning, the explosion. You're not thinking clearly. Perhaps you should rest. Let Dr. Ashford examine. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Cale walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted before him like a sea. You betrayed me, gave the order our security codes, planted C4 in the support columns. Tried to murder Lyra in my own library while I fought the hunters you let inside. He stopped at the base of the platform, looked up at Cassian with eyes that burned. You're a traitor, and I challenge your claim to this court. The hall erupted, vampires shouting. Some in support of Kyle, most in confusion, a few in open hostility. Cassian raised his hand. The noise died. Lord Ravencroft, he said sadly, I understand your pain. Your home is destroyed. You've lost so much. But these accusations are unfounded. I have served you loyally for 160 years. Why would I betray you now? Because you're weak, another voice said. Seraphine Blackthorn emerged from the crowd. She wore a gown the color of blood, her platinum hair swept up in an elaborate style. She looked like a queen already. She climbed the platform to stand beside Cassian. You've always been weak, she continued, speaking to Kyle but projecting to the room, clinging to human morality, protecting cattle like they're something precious, making treaties with creatures that should be our food. Isolde made you soft. And now you bring her diseased bloodline into our sanctuary expecting us to bow? She looked at Lyra with pure contempt. She's homeless, a gutter rat. She smells like filth and desperation. And you kneel to her because a dead woman whispered promises 300 years ago? That's not strength, Ravencroft. That's pathetic. Lyra felt every eye in the hall turn to her, judging, dismissing, seeing exactly what Seraphine wanted them to see. A nobody, a nothing, something to be stepped over and forgotten. For 3 years, Lyra had been invisible. She'd learned to make herself small, quiet, easily ignored. But standing in that hall, surrounded by creatures who could kill her with a thought, something inside her broke. Not in weakness, in fury. You're right, Lyra said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence it carried. I am homeless. I did sleep in gutters. I ate from dumpsters. I wore clothes held together with duct tape and hope. She walked forward, one step, then another, moving toward the platform like she owned it. But I survived. 3 years on streets that would have broken you in 3 days. I survived men who saw me as prey. Winters that killed stronger people. Hunger that hollowed me out until I was more ghost than girl. She stopped at the base of the platform, looked up at Seraphine. You call me weak because I'm human? I call you weak because you've never had to be anything else. You were turned into power, given immortality and strength you didn't earn. But me, every day I'm alive is a choice. Every breath is a victory, and I'm still standing. The hall was dead silent. As for the covenant, Lyra continued, turning to address the room, I didn't know what it meant when my grandmother taught me those words. I thought she was dying, confused, but she wasn't. She was passing down 300 years of trust, of a promise made by a vampire king to a human queen who saved his soul. She pulled something from her pocket. The locket. Broken cord retied, the iron still warm. Cale Ravencroft sealed this locket with his blood to protect Isolde's daughters, her granddaughters, all of them. For 3 centuries, he kept that promise even when there was no one left to hold him to it. That's not weakness, that's honor. She looked at Cassian. You think honor is weakness. You think treaties and promises are chains? But you're wrong. Honor is what separates you from the monsters you pretend not to be. Lyra climbed into the steps. No one stopped her. She faced Cassian directly. You tried to kill me. Told me Cale would never know. That you'd blame the Order. Make yourself look heroic. But here's what you didn't count on. She raised her voice. I know vampire law. Cale taught me. Old law. The kind that predates your courts and councils. And according to ancient covenant, any member of a bloodline under protection has the right to invoke trial by testimony, to speak their truth before the gathered court and demand judgment. Cassian's mask slipped, just for a second. Fear flashed in his eyes. You can't. I invoke trial by testimony, Lyra said clearly, under the covenant of protected bloodlines. Under the seal of Isolde's legacy, I demand the court hear my accusation. The hall exploded into chaos, vampires shouting, some calling her presumptuous, others invoking historical precedent. But Marcus's voice cut through it all. The girl's right. Old law supersedes new. If she invokes testimony, we have to hear it. Unless you want to violate 800 years of tradition? Cassian looked trapped. Seraphine leaned close to him, whispered something Lyra couldn't hear. Cassian straightened, smiled, the charming mask back in place. Of course. By all means, let the humans speak. We have nothing to hide. But his hand moved, subtle, a gesture to someone in the crowd. Lyra saw it, saw the vampires moving, surrounding the exits, cutting off escape routes. This was a trap. They'd let her speak. Then they'd kill her. Blame it on hysteria, on human fragility. And there would be no one left to contradict Cassian's story. Cassian Vale tried to murder me, Lyra said. Her voice was steady. 2 hours after the blood ritual. While Kyle fought the Order hunters in the garden, Cassian came to the library. He grabbed me by the throat, lifted me off the ground, told me I was going to die so Cale would have nothing left to make him weak. She looked around the room, meeting eyes, refusing to be cowed. He said he'd open the gates, let the hunters in, planted the bombs himself, said Cale would never know, that he'd blame the Order and use Cale's grief to reshape him into a weapon. Lies, Seraphine hissed. She's a desperate human trying to save herself. I have proof. Every head turned. Dr. Ashford emerged from the crowd, the kindly vampire grandmother with wire-rimmed glasses. She held a tablet. I performed a medical scan on Lyra when she arrived at the spire, Dr. Ashford said. Part of that scan was a genetic archive, blood sample, tissue sample, DNA record, standard procedure for anyone entering the court's protection. She tapped the tablet. A holographic display appeared above it. Lyra's throat, bruised, fingerprints clearly visible. These injuries occurred between the ritual and the explosion. The bruise pattern matches Cassian Vale's hand exactly. Size, pressure points, even the ring he wears on his right hand left an impression. She swiped. Another image. The iron locket, one side stained dark. This is vampire blood, not KL's. The DNA signature is different. I ran it through our database. It's a match for Cassian Vale. I stabbed him in the eye, Lyra said quietly. With the locket. It was the only way to get free. Dr. Ashford nodded. Cassian visited medical this morning. Claimed he injured himself during the battle with the Order, but the wound was consistent with iron poisoning. To the eye socket, exactly as Lyra described. The room was silent. Cassian's expression had gone cold, and the mask finally dropped. So what? He said. So I touched her. So we argued. That's not proof of betrayal. No, a new voice said, but this is. Marcus held up a phone. On the screen, text messages glowed. Found this on one of the hunters that we killed at the perimeter. Dead man's phone, password protected, but I've been around long enough to know a few tricks. He started reading. Northgate access code 7734. Disable UV sensors at 2200 hours. Ravencroft will be distracted during ritual. Strike then. Signed, CV. He looked up. CV, Cassian Vale. You gave them everything. Times, codes, weak points. You orchestrated the entire attack. Cassian stared at the phone, at Marcus, at the 200 vampires watching him. Then he laughed. It was a cold sound, empty of humor. Fine, he said. You want the truth? Yes, I did it. I opened the gates. I planted the bombs. I tried to kill the human rat. He turned to face the room. Because Ravencroft is weak. He's been weak for 300 years. Ever since that human whore Isolde got under his skin and convinced him we should protect the cattle, that we should hide, bow, scrape, live in the shadows like we're the ones who should be afraid. His voice rose. But we're not the ones who should be afraid. We're apex predators, immortal, powerful. We should rule this world, not hide in it. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Seraphine moved beside him. As am I. She raised her hand. The vampires who had been moving toward the exit stopped, turned. Their eyes glowed red. Thralls. Vampires under compulsion. Slaves to Seraphine's will. 50 of them. You can't win, Ravencroft, Cassian said. I have the numbers, I have the power, and I have something you'll never have. What's that? The willingness to burn the world to get what I want. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a detonator. I have bombs planted in 6 safe houses across the city. 6 locations where vampires are sheltering with their human families. Children, lovers, the ones stupid enough to think the masquerade means something. His thumb hovered over the button. You can try to stop me, but if you do, I push this button, and 50 innocent vampires die along with 200 humans. Or you can kneel, accept me as king, and I let them live. Cale stared at him. Lyra saw the calculation in his eyes. The impossible choice. Save the court, or save the innocents. Don't, Lyra whispered. Don't give him what he wants. I can't let them die. If you kneel, they die anyway. Eventually, he'll kill anyone who remembers you, anyone loyal. He'll purge the court and rebuild it in his image. You know that. Cale's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. So what do we do? Lyra looked at Cassian, at the detonator, at the 50 thralls surrounding them. Then she looked at the locket in her hand, warm, pulsing, sealed with Cale's blood, connected to his power. She'd felt it during the ritual, the rush of his strength, his centuries of accumulated power flowing through their joined hands. The ritual, she said quietly, when you sealed the locket, I felt your power, felt it become part of me. The sanguine heir gene, Cale said, understanding dawning. You can amplify my abilities, share my strength. More than that, I can give you my strength, my humanity, the thing that makes me able to resist compulsion, to fight thrall commands. She met his eyes. Drink from me. Take what you need, and I'll take what you can give. We'll be stronger together than he could ever be alone. Lyra, that's... Our only chance, unless you have a better idea. Kale looked at her. This woman who had been invisible for 3 years, who had survived on scraps and hope, who stood before 200 vampires and refused to bow. It will hurt, he warned. The bond. It's not gentle. I know. Lyra held out her wrist. Do it anyway. Kale took her hand, gentle despite the violence to come. He pulled her close. His lips brushed her ear. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me, for staying, for being stronger than I could ever be. Then his fangs sank into her wrist. The world exploded into light. Not physical light, but power, raw and ancient and vast as the ocean. Lyra felt Kale's strength pouring into her, felt his 423 years of existence, his battles, his losses, his unrelenting will to survive. But more than that, she felt him drinking from her, taking her humanity, her resilience, the strength that came from surviving without power, from being nothing and choosing to become something anyway. Their souls met in the space between heartbeats and became something new. Kale's eyes opened. They weren't amber anymore. They were platinum, white gold, blazing like stars. He released her wrist. The wound closed instantly. When he turned to face Cassian, he didn't look like a vampire king. He looked like a god. You made a mistake, Kale said. His voice resonated, echoed in the stone hall like thunder. You thought I was weak because I chose mercy. But mercy is a choice. Cruelty is surrender. He raised his hand. The thralls screamed, all 50 of them. Seraphine's compulsions shattered like glass. They fell to the ground, freed. You thought you could threaten innocence and I would kneel. But I've been protecting innocence for 300 years. I know every safe house, every shelter, every location where my people hide. Kale smiled. It was terrible. I emptied them 2 hours ago, while you were preening for your coronation, while you were so sure you'd won. I sent Marcus and my loyalists to evacuate every vampire and human in those buildings. Your bombs will destroy empty rooms. Nothing more. Cassian's face went white. He pushed the button. Nothing happened. We also disarmed them, Kale said. But thank you for confirming the locations. He stepped forward. Each step rang against the stone. You called me weak, but weakness isn't choosing to protect. Weakness is needing to destroy because you're too afraid of what you might become if you had to be gentle. Kale stopped in front of Cassian, looked at him with eyes that held 4 centuries of patience and pain. You were my brother. I trusted you, taught you, gave you everything. And you spat on it because you wanted more, wanted easier, wanted permission to be the monster you always were underneath. I wanted to stop pretending, Cassian hissed. Stop bowing to cattle, to weaklings, to... Kale grabbed him by the throat, lifted him off the ground. Then stop pretending now. He threw Cassian across the hall. The vampire hit the far wall hard enough to crack stone, slumped to the ground. Seraphine screamed, lunged at Kale with claws extended. He caught her wrist, twisted. She went to her knees. You wanted a king? Kale's voice filled the hall. You wanted strength? Here it is. Strength enough to spare you despite your betrayal. Strength enough to exile you instead of executing you. Strength enough to choose mercy when cruelty would be so much easier. He released Seraphine, stepped back. Cassian Vale, Seraphine Blackthorn, you are hereby banished from the Pacific Northwest Court. You will leave this territory, never return. If you do, the exile becomes execution. If you harm any under my protection, the sentence is death. Do you understand? Cassian pulled himself to his feet. Blood ran from his mouth. His eyes were pure hate. This isn't over. Yes, Kale said quietly. It is. He turned to face the gathered court. I am Cahill Ravencroft. I have ruled this territory for 200 years. I have protected you, guided you, kept the masquerade intact even when it cost me everything. And I will continue to do so, not because I'm weak, but because I choose to be better than the monsters who made us. He held out his hand to Lyra. She took it. Let him pull her to stand beside him on the platform. This is Lyra Ashwin, descendant of Isolde, heir to the covenant that has protected this court for 3 centuries. She is under my protection by blood and oath, and anyone who harms her answers to me. He looked down at the golden chalice, picked it up. But more than that, she is my equal, my partner, the bridge between human and vampire that Isolde always wanted us to build, and I name her sanguine consort, with all the rights and protections that title carries. He offered her the chalice. Lyra stared at it, at the room full of vampires watching her, at Kyle, who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. She thought of the dumpsters, the cold nights, the 3 years of being invisible. She took the chalice and drank. The hall erupted in cheers. 3 months later, the rebuilding of the spire was half complete, glass and steel rising from the ashes. Modern and beautiful. A fortress disguised as art. But tonight, Lyra stood on the rooftop of a different building, a converted warehouse in Georgetown that served as temporary court headquarters. The city spread below her, lights like stars reflected in the sound, the Space Needle glowing in the distance. She wore a dress now, simple, black, with a silver pendant around her neck. Not the locket, that was sealed in a vault, sacred, protected. This pendant was new, a gift from the court, obsidian set in white gold, the symbol of the sanguine consort. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. "You're thinking too loud." Kale stepped out of the shadows. He wore jeans and a sweater. His hair was slightly messy from the wind. He looked younger like this, less king, more man. "I'm thinking about how different everything is," Lyra said. "3 months ago, I was sleeping in your car. Now I'm standing on a rooftop wearing a dress that costs more than I made in a year. Do you miss it, your old life?" Lyra was quiet, honest. "I miss the freedom. No one expected anything from me. I could disappear and no one would notice. But I don't miss the fear, the hunger, the cold." She turned to face him. "And I don't miss being invisible." Kale smiled, soft and genuine. "You were never invisible to me. From the moment you spoke those 7 words, I saw you. All of you." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. "I have something for you." Lyra's heart stuttered. "Kale, it's not what you think." "Well, it is, but not. Just open it." She took the box, opened it. Inside was a ring, white gold, set with a stone that looked like captured moonlight. "It was as old as," Kale said quietly. "The ring she wore when she made me promise to protect her bloodline. When she died, I kept it, wore it for 300 years. But I think she'd want you to have it. I can't take this. You already have everything she wanted to build. Peace between our kinds. A court that protects instead of prays. You embody that. You are what she died trying to create." Lyra looked at the ring, at KL, at this impossible man who had knelt for her in the rain. "The debt," she whispered, "the last winter. When does it fall?" KL took the ring from the box, slid it onto her finger. "I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe the debt isn't meant to be paid. Maybe it's meant to be honored. Every day, in every choice to protect instead of destroy. To see instead of overlook. To love instead of consume." He cupped her face in his hands. Cold skin against warm. "I'm 423 years old. I've seen empires fall. I've survived plagues and wars and centuries of loneliness. But standing here with you, this is the first time in 300 years I feel alive. Truly alive. Not just existing, living." "Kale, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to feel the same. I just needed you to know. You saved me. Not just from Cashin, from myself, from the monster I was becoming." Lyra looked up at him. This vampire king, this ancient creature, this man who had chosen to be better. "I'm still learning how to be a consort," she said. "How to navigate vampire politics. How to not feel like a fraud in expensive dresses." "You're not a fraud. You're the most real person I've ever known." "I'm still homeless, in my head, still waiting for someone to take it all away." "Then we'll wait together, until you believe it's real, until you know you belong." Lyra smiled, rose on her toes, kissed him. His lips were cold, but the kiss was warm, full of promise and possibility and hope. When they broke apart, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Kale winced, stepped back into the shadow of the door. "I should go inside." "Wait." Lyra pulled a small vial from her pocket. Clear liquid. "Dr. Ashford made this. UV resistance serum. Experimental. But she thinks it'll work for about an hour." Kale stared at the vial. "I haven't seen a sunrise in 400 years. Would you like to see one now?" He took the vial, drank it, waited. Then he stepped into the light. For the first time in centuries, the sun touched Kale Ravencroft's skin. He didn't burn. He looked at Lyra, smiled, really smiled. Joy and wonder and something that looked like tears. "Thank you." They stood together as the sun rose over Seattle. A vampire king and a homeless girl who became a queen. Hand in hand, side by side. The debt was paid, The last winter had fallen, and spring was beginning.